What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys had a wonderful day out there. I'll tell you what, if you've been an investor in advanced micro devices, ticker symbol AMD over the last year, you've had a great year. The stock's up 49%, just year to date up 33%. And I got to shout out the users of this channel. I wasn't an investor in this channel. I got a ton of comments. Do videos on AMD. I started doing videos and investigating this company, and I started buying this stock in its sideways consolidation areas down here south of $80. And now we're seeing this stock's been on a monster move later in this year as we've ticked up all the way up over $125 per share in the after hours. Stocks trading off just slightly to about $122 per share. Talk about this from a technical perspective, man. This thing went parabolic, pulled back, went parabolic again. Talk about what we think the probabilities of where AMD stock could be heading in the near future, just in case you want to add to more shares of AMD. Now, the stock does have a forward PE of 48, and it might seem a little rich, certainly if you compare it to a Qualcomm or an Intel, but what are those companies doing? They're not growing their top line revenue by, just 53%. Yeah, 53% revenue growth year over year over in AMD, ticked up to their revenues to $4.3 billion. Now, that should get you excited, but what also should get you excited is Q4 revenues. We'll go over Q3 revenues here in a second, walk through all the revenue, the profit. We'll look at the balance sheet over at AMD as well, and we'll show you that we have a quarter that we just printed, $4.3 billion. Well, Q4 is coming up, and they're looking for about $4.5 billion, and that's absolutely fantastic. Gross margins for the most recent quarter, compare those quarter over quarter and year over year, those just came in at 48% as well. All things being considered, AMD absolutely humming along. Now, is it humming along as good as NVIDIA? Probably not, and that's why the investors are paying such a huge premium. So what I've got up here is a price to sales ratio. Don't always look at price to sales, and not all of these companies are comparable. Look, I'll have people say TSM's a fab, Qualcomm, Intel, AMD, they all do things a little bit differently. I understand that, but if we're building a portfolio of all these stocks, we're trying to figure out which ones we want to buy, we're probably going to compare them all to each other to a certain degree. Now, the market pays a massive premium for NVIDIA, nearly 28 times sales on this one. But look, AMD is catching up a little bit, okay? This thing used to be down south of, like 3 or 4 times sales. Now it's up closer to 11. In fact, it's just surpassed what the market was paying for TSM more recently. And so this stock, as it's growing its earnings, has increased its multiple as well. Now, Qualcomm and Intel bring up the rear. And if you look at their revenue growth, they're not growing as fast as an NVIDIA or an AMD. So the market is not willing to pay for that type of investment. If those companies, Intel and Qualcomm, were able to increase their sales, increase their revenue growth, and start accelerating that, well, you better believe that they would get a multiple much closer to AMD, but they don't have that at the current time. I think it's justified what the market is doing. Now, let's jump into the numbers as well, because these are really important with AMD. As I said, I got suggested to invest in AMD, and so the first thing I did is exactly what you see here on NVIDIA. I pull it up, I compare it a little bit to other companies, get a general feel of what the market is paying from a multiple perspective in comparable companies. Now, the second and probably the most important thing is we pulled up these numbers, and I remember the first time I pulled up AMD numbers, I was absolutely blown away, and I wanted to run out and buy this stock absolutely as quick as I can. And so what I did is I came over and viewed it from a technical perspective. So literally over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the exact process, how you pick a winning investment. Doesn't really matter what sector out there. So we take a look at this net revenues. We see here the far left-hand column is our most recent quarter. And what they do nicely over at AMD is they give you a quarter over quarter view. So this middle column is just basically 3 months ago on a quarter basis. And then we get a year over year view, basically the first and third columns. And we notice that our revenues have gone from 2.8 billion up to this 4.3. That's where you're getting that fantastic growth on that top line. And even quarter over quarter, we went from 3.8 up to this 4.3. And again, AMD, I'm confusing my chip makers, is guiding to 4.5 billion in the next quarter. So we're expected to go from 4.3 up to that 4.5. Now we've got cost of sales here coming in at 2.2. We're sitting at 1.5, and we're sitting at 2 in the previous quarter. That gives us gross profit coming in at $2 billion. So you went from 1.2 up to 2, and quarter over quarter, you went from 1.8 to 2. Now, why is this important? You've got those gross margin percentages, and they are expanding. As I'm sure most of you are you're aware, there's quote-unquote chip shortages out there, and AMD is handling that nicely by raising prices, okay, right? Okay, you've got a shortage out there. Your customers are willing to pay you more, so you got your gross margin percentage coming in at 44% over at AMD last year at this time. Now they ticked all the way up to 48%. When you got customers like Apple and Tesla that are firing on all cylinders, so to speak, well, guess what? They're willing to pay more, and those companies certainly can afford to pay more, especially when they've got lots of competition to keep at bay. They lock up some nice prices from companies like AMD. AMD makes some money, and companies like Tesla and Apple make some money as well. Now, you've got some cost here, you got some research and development, but look, you went from 508 up to 765. These are very much intact, and what I love even more here, take a look at this marketing general administrative. I tell you what, I can't remember the CEO. It's a wonderful young woman that runs AMD. She does an absolute fantastic job. She's one of the best CEOs in the world, and certainly from a female CEO perspective, I think she's the best in the world, because you look at these cost controls. You went from 273 up to just 376 on the marketing general administrative side. I can't emphasize how wonderful that is. When you grew your revenues 54% year over year, and your marketing general administrative expenses barely budged. I mean, that's up just $100 million. I mean, that's just absolutely fantastic. A lot of other companies you see just blow up their R&D and their marketing, and it blows up their operating income. Not at AMD. Take a look at our operating income. Came in at a strong 948. Hello, we're really close to that $1 billion mark on that operating side. Maybe they tick up over that in the next period. We'll see what happens. We went from 449 to 831 last quarter, and now we're up to 948 on that operating side. I tell you what, AMD is just, it's like a car running down the road. It just keeps increasing its speed, okay? It's increasing its revenue growth. It's increasing its profits. It's keeping cost absolutely under control, and it's also expanding margins. That's like a win. Okay, this company, if it was like a basketball team to start the season out, they'd be like 8-9-0 by now. Okay, this is absolutely fantastic. This is absolutely what you want to see from a company. Now, from a balance sheet perspective, paints a really nice story as well. We don't got boatloads of cash. Okay, this is not Google, this is not Microsoft. Okay, but we have some cash on the balance sheet. This company is trying to complete an acquisition of Xilinx that will mess with the balance sheet, will mess with the financials a little bit, but will help the competitive advantage over at AMD. And I tell you what, when your business is as hot as this, I like to see you be aggressive on that acquisition side. And if you can get that through regulators, I tell you what, an acquisition like that in the future could be darn near impossible. And so if you can get it done now, if you're AMD, well, it sure as heck locks up some future, but kind of a future moat around your business that might be difficult to get through regulators in the future. What I like too is we barely got any debt on here. Okay, long-term debt basically went to short-term debt over the last year, but really not a whole lot going on here over at AMD. Super clean balance sheet, super clean financials. I'm loving what I'm seeing at AMD. I'm loving it even as a shareholder that has held this stock for a long period of time, really just actually over the last year or so. I've been in this one again. I bought it when it was in this sideways consolidation. I bought it at the bottom end of the range. Every time this stock ticked down below about 70, 80 bucks per share, that is when we stepped in and bought, and we bought it numerous times, and it built up a nice position, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 worth of AMD. Again, some of you might laugh at that figure and say, I'm playing with pennies. I live in a high-tax state. I only invest in my IRA account. I'm only allowed to invest $6,000 per year in that. And if you think that's unfair, well, come out here and vote for other people other than the government that we have enlisted over here in California. Now, beyond that, look, AMD has been on a rocket move. Once it got above, this is why we love charting this, and we love charting these kind of like upper ends of a range, okay? So we're range bound with AMD, essentially between $75 and $100 per share. And the reason why we mark out these ranges is because if we broke below 75, hello, look out below. The stock would have got all the way down to 50 bucks per share, $55 per share, almost guaranteed. I wouldn't necessarily guarantee it, but a very high probability of that. Now, the reverse is true when you break above consolidation, okay? And in this case, once you got above $100, take a look at this. Once you got above $100 on this one, it went up like a rocket ship up to 120 and then came all the way. You often see this too. And so don't get super impatient when you see a stock, it breaks above and you're like, oh, I missed missed it, okay? It went from 100 to 120 in a matter of a couple days, like literally a couple days, like a week's time. Went from 100 to 120, and you're like, oh, I missed it. What often happens is it comes back and back test, okay? Comes all the way back down and back test 100, okay? Maybe not on the nose. I probably would have stepped in at that time right here at 105, okay? Got a level here at 105. I would have jumped in here probably a little early. Got a couple shares at 105, came back and retested 100. Might have bought a couple more shares there. And look, you could have set a stop loss here at 95, okay? Because if you break 100, okay, this was just a fake out, and we come all the way back down. But then we bounced here like a basketball at 100, and we came all the way back up here to 127, pulled back to 120. Right now, we've got some areas of support, and these are fragile areas of support up here at 120. The stock's really in rarefied air up here. It could honestly go either way. We've got some stops down here at 115. 115 would be an interesting area. If you wanted to see a pullback in AMD shares, you've also got an area here where I couldn't draw a line properly, but you got an area here at 110, basically in $5 increments under 115. You've got areas of support there for AMD, and I'm rounding these numbers off. If you're trying to do option trades and things like that, you probably want to get a little more exact. Now, what I am seeing here is I want to highlight this sideways consolidation that we did with AMD. Okay, we bounced from 75 up to 100, and we did that from August of 2020 up until August of this previous year, really just like 2 or 3 months ago. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AMD. We are going to consolidate. The lower end of the range is probably going to be between 100 and 105. The high end of the range, I don't think we've necessarily established it yet, but I think it's going to be in this 120, 130 range. Okay, this I think is going to be the top of the range. I think this stock is likely to see pullbacks again into this 105, probably $100 range. You get pullbacks into 100, 105 with AMD. I think it's a buying opportunity, especially if you believe in the long-term growth of this company, especially if you believe they're able to keep these margins where they're at, if not expand them, and the revenue growth continues. Not only on top of that, I think you've got one of the best CEOs, the best managers, one of the best leaders in the entire stock market. Forget the chip space. Forget female CEOs. I think the CEO of AMD is one of the best in the world, and you see it by how this company is operating in a very competitive space. They have very, very capable competitors to compete against. Intel, very capable, very well capitalized. Qualcomm, the same. NVIDIA, even more so. And AMD is not only holding their own, they're doing an absolute fantastic job. And I think we've got years left in this chip cycle. There'll be people in the comments down below will argue that the chip cycle is about to be over. Absolutely not. You look at the next generation computers that Apple introduced just this last week with their new chips. You look at all the chips that are going in electric vehicles like Teslas and Fords and GMs. Look, the chip cycle is far from over. In fact, I think it's just beginning to accelerate in the coming years ahead. AMD will likely capture a lot of that business. That was AMD. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We'll be back again soon with more. Good luck with your investments.